Us kids in the very early 70s, late 60s. Most notable, what set this thing apart was the tank color and badging that was, prevalent to just the RH Suzukis with the works bikes with the stripe and the red S. They had this awesome see-through kind of nylon-looking gas cap, a lot of little machine bolts and trinkety stuff on there. And also, they had these big, what we call milk bottle side panels, opaque. You could actually see through the things because it was a prototype plastic thing made at the factory in limited quantities just for the race bikes for lighter weight. And I'm not sure why they were white at first. Later they were yellow. They had big giant aluminum screws and stuff so they could get away with no washers. Other stuff they did was they were starting to figure out early on that running the seat as far to the tank as they could. They were starting to figure out sitting farther forward deal for the turns, even back then in 72, 73. Some stuff in the engine area that is a little less production and more factory looking was they had shorter kick cranks. Even though the motors had more compression, the race motors, this thing would keep it from flopping in and out and getting hooked in your leg when racing, as well as some big soft edges and all the controls, so you wouldn't be scuffing on you the whole time. Pretty amazing they rode with these little pinner foot pegs, but they did weld these barnacles, actually cast and welded them to build up on that to keep a little grip on there. Aluminum motor plates with hollowed out bolts, again a weight deal. And one of the most standout things to me always, still to this day, was the shape of the exhaust pipe, the low, what they call upswept exhaust pipe that was legend, to the RH models. The sound they made, the look they had, how they came up tucked around, that's all really cool stuff, as well as they had really nice little billet trinkety stuff. Again, what made the things such a works bike for Suzuki is early on they were so far ahead of making proprietary pieces for weight and strength and minimum size that would get through it, for heavy use. In the back, they use stuff similar to this. These aluminum torque links replaced the steel on the production bikes. Even the RHs, this was a pretty cool deal ahead of their time. The brake rear cable, even though it's not a floating brake, it takes the change in the torque out of the rod at the pedal and gives you a way better feel, way less chatter. So I think that was almost kind of a mistake that worked out for them. They were the first guys also to get rid of the rear fender loop that was shown hanging outside the frame and mount the fender up underneath the seat, which really compacted it all. Again, took some of the high weight off the bike. On this side, they had some pretty cool stuff that I actually saw in the little RMs or the RHs we used to look through the window down there in Buena Park at Joe Robert's World Champ 72 bike. And they had a similar deal like this. I guess they used a lot of different size sprockets on his thing and had adjustable wheel on the chain tensioner as well as, super windowed out sprocket. His had way, of course, straighter up and down, less travel shocks than these, but they did have a pretty beefy swing arm. They had this little knurled nub on the shifter, which just had to ruin your foot at the end of 2 40-minute motos, but I guess they did that for grip and slip, plus the shortness for, less travel on the thing. Another RH feature that we've replicated here is this nice cast S case, which is, that Suzuki S is just legendary in motorcycle racing and on all types of motorcycle racing that the Japs are involved in. Kind of porcupine-looking cylinder was an RH trade. These little notches here gives it more right angle areas. Actually, is like having a bigger fin, because if you follow the outside and calculate all that area, it's like having a bigger fin because it dissipates on all the edges. So that's a little tricky deal they had there, as well as this was one of the first short bolt engines where the studs coming out of the case were short instead of going all the way through to the head for stretch and keeping the cylinder nice and flat and square, makes better power when the thing heats up. Big finned head was a trick deal. And again, you can see the other part of the pipe that we did in the RH faction with the tapered head pipe, growing from the exhaust port all the way out, trick bolts and again, dished out fasteners and stuff. They were one of the first guys to use the CDI ignition. All their works bikes had that stuff. Up here on the fork, they had reasonably large tubes for their time, and really hard tubes, stiff. Even the Suzuki production stuff was nice and stiff for its time. And then they would spin these housings all down to knock weight off the thing, you know, and they'd have to use plastic covers on them because they were so thin that rocks from the other open and 250 class bikes would cave these things in and actually stick them to the tube, so that wasn't good. The front wheels was pretty trick how they did. This is just simulated, but the real works ones, which were aluminum and mag castings, they actually machined and pressed a ring over the spoke plate of the hub to give it additional strength from the spokes pulling through and stuff flexing around. And I'm sure it also stiffened the brake drum so the thing had, you know, more positive braking. They were way ahead too on the way they placed the cams inside here. They had them really wide, which makes the shoe move less, the pivot points, and gives more contact on the shoe for a single actuation part. Legendary Suzuki mud flap. This was kind of one of their trademarks too. I'm sure that was a rider-born deal when they rode it and mud was coming back or something, and that's where that came from. One of the riders probably said, hey, we need a longer fender or something to keep the mud off my goggles.